This week on WNIN Lawmakers, Indiana State Senator Mark Messmer and Indiana State Representatives Wendy McNamara and Ron Bacon join us next. I'm John Gibson, and this is WNIN Lawmakers. Uncertainty over Curtis Hill's future as Indiana Attorney General, calls for greater accountability of virtual charter schools, and a fix to Indiana's welfare eligibility laws. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brandon Smith reports on the week at the State House.
A disciplinary hearing officer says Attorney General Curtis Hill's law license should be suspended for 60 days without automatic reinstatement. That stems from allegations he groped 4 women. Legislative leaders say if that happens, they're not sure whether Hill is still eligible to be Attorney General. They're asking the Indiana Supreme Court for guidance on that question when it issues its final decision. A new report alleges 2 Indiana virtual charter schools defrauded the state to the tune of at least $68 million. Democrats argue this calls for greater legislative oversight and accountability of virtual charters, but Republicans say the proper measures are already in place and weren't adequately used in this case by, among others, the State Department of Education. And Indiana lawmakers want to fix a flaw in the state's government benefits system. Going forward, children who get a paid internship or work-based learning opportunity won't get that income counted against their family's eligibility for food stamps and welfare. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
Now I'm joined by Indiana State Senator Mark Messmer, whose district includes Pike, Spencer, and portions of Du Bois, Knox, Gibson, and Warwick counties. Indiana State Representative Wendy McNamara, who represents most of Posey County and a section of Vanderburgh County, and Indiana State Representative Ron Bacon, whose district includes large portions of Warwick, Spencer, and Pike counties. Thanks to all 3 of you for joining us today. We've got a full stage. It's good to have you with us. Well, let's start with House Bill 1414. In recent years, there seems to be an attempt just about every year to legislate to help keep coal plants open. This year, it's House Bill 1414, which would require coal plants to get some state approval before closing. Of course, we hear about several area mines still closing. What are your thoughts about the state regulating whether coal plants can or can't close? Let's start with Senator Messmer. As I understand, you're a co-sponsor on the Senate side. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes, House Bill 1414 came out of the House. It was a close vote getting out of the House, but and the bill changed drastically from when the legislation started to when it finally passed on the House side, and really has got it down to now where it's just a pause on any more closures, and all the utility companies say there are no more announced closures, so I mean effectively it won't do a lot, but there was a couple of provisions in the bill that have utility operators and industrial users a little bit concerned about the potential impact on rates, and right now the sunset date is set for May 1st, 2021, and there's concern that maybe next year during the session that sunset date could just go away, and then that would be problematic for time going forward. But Representative Soliday's intent for that bill is for that to just put a pause in any more announced closures, or if they're going to close, the process of getting through an IURC review would get them to the end of the year when the 21st Century Task Force is going to have their recommendations in place anyway.
All right, well, let's let Representative Bacon in on this conversation. You voted for the measure.
Yes, I did.
And I know coal is a big part of your family and your district. What are your thoughts? Are you concerned that the state shouldn't be telling essentially companies whether they can close or not?
Well, I think the bill doesn't tell them that they can't close. It gives them a process to go through if they are considering closing. They've got to let us know and go through the IURC and go through and then put out the reason they're closing, and then if that's okay with the IURC, then they can close it. But to intermittently just tell us suddenly you're going to close it when we don't have anything taking the place of that electric electricity that's being generated there. That's our concern. That's my main concern, not just for the coal, but for my ratepayers. We pay the highest rates in the state of Indiana, down here in southwestern Indiana. And if they're going to close a coal plant, what's going to take up that need for the electricity, and then what's it going to do to the ratepayers? That's really my main concern on that, besides the coal miners.
Now, Senator Messmer mentioned there that there certainly are some folks out there that are concerned that if you're not allowing plants to move to other forms of energy, that's going to keep rates higher. I mean, do you see that as a possibility?
Well, that's a very good possibility. Yeah, it's going. If we allow the new gas plants to come in, the solar fields, and now they're talking wind in the counties around us, those are going to cost. They'll cost a whole lot more to build, and the rate structure is going to go up to pay for that. The ratepayers are going to pay for it. It's not going to be the electric company that says, "Oh, we're just going to build it." And
in time when those rates go down, though, I guess is
but the only provision in that bill that would potentially cause rates to go up is extension of the coal storage from 45 to 90 days. Nothing else in that bill would cause any rate increase, and we're willing to look at the viability of that extension out to 90 days, because there's only one utility company in the state that's beyond the 45 days of storage currently anyway. So if the 90-day storage comes offline, then there's nothing in that bill that would cause a rate to go up.
Right. And this bill is only for 1 year, correct?
1 year. And when you close a plant
months.
and you replace it with a new gas plant, you're typically closing a plant that has accelerated depreciation that ends up costing the consumer more, and then you have the cost of the new plant that they have a guaranteed rate of return on that costs the consumer more. So there's nothing in that bill short of extending the 90-day coal storage that would have any positive or any upward impact on rates.
Yeah. Representative McNamara, as I understand it, you did not vote yay or nay on this particular measure. Were you split, or is there a reason for your no vote, or non-vote, I should say?
Yeah, on occasion, people miss votes. To be honest with you, this is the first vote I've ever missed in the legislature in 10 years. I had an emergency come up at school that needed to be addressed. A parent needed my attention immediately, so it'll come back around after it passes the Senate.
Yep, it'll get amended.
And if it's amended, we vote on it again.
What kind of amendments do you anticipate?
Well, the two things that I just talked about.
Okay, gotcha.
The sunset date and the 90-day versus 45-day of coal storage.
All right, well, let's move on to redistricting. It's a census year, as we all know, and Indiana will be redistricting in 2021. Do you think there need to be adjustments to the way Indiana draws the districts? I know we had State Senator Venita Becker on recently. She said that Indiana is one of those few states where the districts do seem to be set up more geographically reasonable, I guess you might say. I guess we'll start with Representative McNamara. What are your thoughts on the way Indiana draws the districts?
If I look at my district from 2010 to today, it's a much more reasonable district than it was in 2010. I think that if you look at the Constitution from a constitutional perspective, it's the Indiana General Assembly's responsibility to draw the lines. People who call for these independent commissions would be going against what the Constitution says. And I know this is one of Representative Bacon's favorite questions to answer, so I'll let him take over from there.
Well, Representative Bacon, so what are your thoughts about the way the
redistricting I wish I'd known you were going to ask that. I would have brought my old district and my new district, which I have plastered on my wall at the State House, and because my old district was very gerrymandered, went through the middle of Evansville, around the west side of Evansville, across Gibson County at the very top for 3 precincts, then came back into Warwick County, and all of the section through the middle of Evansville was a different district. So it was very, very gerrymandered. Now it's contiguous, it's 3 counties, it's rural area, and it's set up the way the Constitution says it should be set up. So I'm very happy with it the way it is now, and think we're doing a much better job than it was in the past.
I would challenge anybody to describe to me what a nonpartisan election commission would be, because
Correct.
anybody who's involved has an interest in political boundaries, by definition, would not be nonpartisan.
So you don't think there's much of a chance of putting together a nonpartisan redistricting committee?
Explain to me what a nonpartisan group would be.
Right.
It's going to be partisan. It's just going to be, who's on it and what partisan, balance do they do they push for? So
And in order to do that, we would have to change the Constitution, because the Constitution says very plainly that the General Assembly will draw the lines.
I guess.
So if they want to change that, we can.
My challenge is where is the statistical evidence that any representation in the General Assembly is non-reflective of the state at large? When you look at the county commissioners statewide are elected on the entire county level. 90% of the commissioners in Indiana are Republican. 80% of all local elected officials across the state are Republican, and we have 80% of the Senate and 67% of the House. And so how does that representation?
Is that the reason why the districts look so uniform now? I mean, is it mostly one party, that's got them in that kind of shape?
No, the districts are set to where there's no county where a county is split that they aren't split on school district lines. Contain as much of a whole county, if at all possible, where you can, and they are contiguous. They don't look like octopuses. They don't look like alligators. They're concise. They're compact. They're geographically. They keep communities of interest together where at all possible. And within all that, you still have to comply with all the federal rules for minority representation within districts. And these districts were statistically within fractions of a percent of what they needed to be population across every congressional House and Senate district in 2011.
All right, well, let's move on to a bill that passed out of the House unanimously, and it's now passed the Senate Family and Children's Services Committee. It makes sure that a minor's paid internship doesn't count against a low-income family's assistance benefits. Senator Messmer, you were the Senate sponsor, as I understand it, on this bill. Why do you believe it's important?
Well, it's a great bill that protects families from getting bumped out of Medicaid, Medicare, whatever food stamps, whatever public assistance they'd be participating in. When you're trying to incentivize and encourage students to get internships that raise their skill level, that increase their employability, and then the little bit of income they make might bump them out of some assistance that they're getting. It's a great clarification to our laws as far as eligibility for those programs. I'm thrilled to be sponsoring that on the Senate side, and that bill got out of committee and it'll be on the floor for final passage this week.
All right, and of course we mentioned the House passed it unanimously. Representative McNamara, you work in the school corporation. You work with kids obviously a lot. What does this measure mean to you?
I think it means upward mobility. It gives them the opportunity to, in particular my case, my students wind up paying for their college tuition right now, and it'll give them the ability to hopefully have access not only to their job and those sort of things, but I look at it as an upward mobility piece, because it gives them the freedom and flexibility to add to that income and make themselves have access, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Sure. And obviously you voted for it as well.
Sure. And I feel it's interns aren't paid a lot. We all know that. They're interns. It's like sort of a beginning job in the field that they're looking at and looking closely at. So to have that income be counted against them I think it's a great way to get them and find out that they do like that area, and then it doesn't count against the assistance that they're needing.
Yeah. Now, you all drive a great distance, well, at least a fairly great distance to the State House and back to our area. Which brings me to the hands-free driving bill that's gotten a lot of attention. How do you feel about Representative Sullivan's hand-free driving bill? Essentially, you can't be holding a cell phone as you drive. And Representative Bacon, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm definitely all for it because I think it's, distracted driving is one of the worst problems we have as far as accidents and deaths. And so when I'm driving back and forth to Indianapolis, mine's down by my thing, and I've got the little pad there, and I just got to talk. So the technology's here now. So I don't think it's really going to be an issue. Some people are going to complain, especially those of older cars. And I do have a couple of classic cars that I'm either going to have my wife make the phone calls for me if she's there, or I'm going to have to put in a Bluetooth and figure it. But I think it's definitely needed, and it will cut down on our accident and death rates.
So the hands-free technology is there. What do you think of that measure, Representative McNamara? You support it?
I support it. I also have another bill, House Bill 1225, which is a reaction to a distracted driver hitting one of our law enforcement officer while he was helping a disabled vehicle. We see too often people that are driving distracted, looking down at their phones. Hopefully this will have an impact, if not a message saying, get off your phone, pay attention to driving down the road. You know, I've got a cup holder with my cell phone on it. It has changed the way that I drive back and forth for 3 hours in Indianapolis. So yes, I support the measure, and hopefully it will lead to fewer distracted driving deaths, fewer accidents, and ultimately become a habit for all people.
I guess the idea is to change driving habits, isn't it?
Yeah.
Senator Messmer, it passed a Senate committee this week. Do you support it in the Senate?
Yes, I do, and I think it'll pass quite easily. It was passed pretty strongly in the House, and I think the numbers will be there in the Senate as well. It's not the only distracted driving issue to deal with, but it's statistically the most significant. And I mean, Representative McNamara's bill dealing with the law enforcement officer was killed. I mean, we've heard multiple stories as that issue's moved through about repeat people that were involved in some of those distracted driving deaths, and construction workers, law enforcement get put in a pretty large area of jeopardy without this.
I also
We'll
think
give
that-
the law enforcement officers some time to
Right.
let people get used to the changes,
Right,
but
right.
and it has a stair-stepping, I think, impact on what the violations are. So I think people will adjust.
I think it'll be like the culture of seat belts, because I mean, it'll just eventually it will very quickly change just how we're doing things. Because I can't even get in my car with my grandkids now and put it in gear if they don't have their seat belts on. They're screaming at me, and it's a culture change.
Yeah,
So
for
it's-
those of
it's
us of a
that much,
certain
you know.
age, you mentioned your
Right.
classic cars.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, you had no seat belt and a metal
Right.
dashboard. You
Yep.
know,
Mhm.
so yeah, times
culture.
change, culture
Right.
change.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so-
all right. All right, well, let's move on. I will remind our radio listeners, by the way, that this is Lawmakers on WNIN FM. And our guests today are Indiana State Senator Mark Messmer and Indiana State Representative Wendy McNamara, and also State Representative Ron Bacon. Let's move over to a bill that's gotten quite a bit of attention, Senate Bill 207. It was defeated in the Indiana Senate. It would have continued a needle exchange program past July of 2021. I believe the House now is looking at it, possibly trying to extend it for another year. Senator Messmer, as I understand it, you voted against the measure. Why do you
Well,
feel opposed to that?
when we approved that legislation initially, we were told it was a 4-year program, a needle exchange program, and what it has turned out to be is completely not a needle exchange program, just a needle dispensing program. And there was really no support on extending a program that doesn't appear to be functioning the way it was sold. And we were also told that the people that are dispensing needles are also dispensing all types of paraphernalia for drug use, and it just did not appear to be meeting the standards of what it was sold when it was passed initially, and no real need to extend it.
I know we don't have a needle exchange program here in the Evansville area, but you don't see it working in any of the other places where they've been implemented?
Not as an exchange program at all.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a needle dispensary program. There's not been any statistical number of needles turned in. They end up on the sidewalks and the trash cans and on the playgrounds. They end up a public health hazard.
Well, it is over in the House side now. Representative McNamara, what are your thoughts on a needle exchange program?
The bill died in the Senate?
It got voted down.
Okay, so it did not come to the
Yeah,
House?
so it hasn't come.
But is there any action to try to rejuvenate the bill?
Oh, there's always action to try to
Yeah, right.
rejuvenate bills. A couple people have approached me. I have a bill coming up this week that it probably would be germane to. I'm unlikely to follow through because a lot of the arguments that Senator Messmer just presented are concerns.
You share those
But
concerns?
we haven't been privy to both sides of the discussion. So I'm not willing to, add something to that extent to a bill that I have.
And Representative Bacon, your opportunity to weigh in here. Do you think it's something that should be considered in the House?
Well, it was considered in the House. The House initiated the program 4 years ago,
Right.
and when we had the big epidemic in, I think it was Madison County, and there was a big issue. And in the beginning, after we passed it, it did work for a short period of time. But as Senator Messmer says, it didn't do what we planned it to do. There were too many other counties trying to get on it, saying they needed an exchange program. They really didn't need an exchange program, and it turned into something else. Even Vandenberg County at one time expressed a desire to get into it, but didn't meet all the requirements, and so it was shut down. But I'm definitely, without the good data from it, it's been 4 years, and it has not shown afterwards to do that, so we shouldn't continue it. Should look at other avenues and other places to go.
Gotcha. All right, well, let's move on to another bill that's gotten a lot of attention. That was the $291 million in surplus dollars that the General Assembly, it was the first bill signed by the governor this year that went to higher education building projects instead of potentially teacher pay. Before the session began, the governor indicated he'd like to use money to help increase teacher pay. Why do you think that wasn't included? And is that a concern? When as that effort continues. And you're in education, Representative McNamara, so we'll start with you.
We have strived since the day I've been in office. The House Republicans have been very fiscally responsible, and that has led to budget surpluses that we have been able to pay off our debt. We're not Illinois. We have our pension funds taken care of, and all that sort of thing, and being able to help our universities out and pay off their bonds is even putting us further fiscally responsible. As far as the teacher pay piece of it, I would like to know, because when we get data from across the state, there's a lot of school corporations that were able to give their schools raises this year. We have invested over $750 million on top of traditional pay for schools. So my question is, there's a task force that the governor has put together to drill down on what are the issues. Are there gaps because of the tax caps? Is that a reason some communities might be struggling? Mm-hmm. I don't know. If it's true, then we really need to look at that and see what we can do to offset those issues. Is it a local school corporation responsibility? Are they being efficient with the dollars that they've been given? Or is it that the General Assembly needs to put more money in? That's what I would like answers to. I don't believe that I believe what they asked for $75 million and just spreading it out over the state will make an impact, because what's going to happen next year? What are we going to do for the monies that may or may not be there next year? So I would like to see what's the conversation around, what's the data look like around, what is the cause? And it might be different in every community.
Well, obviously, we've seen, once again, on President's Day, there were some teacher rallies in Indianapolis. Teachers have been making their presence known at the State House. Representative Bacon, your thoughts on that? This surplus money just sort of appeared, and a lot of folks thought, well, there's an opportunity to, boost teacher pay. Why not?
It didn't just appear. It's because we're doing a very good job financially and fiscally within the state, so we're collecting more money. But certain school corporations did give quite a few raises, quite a number of raises. I mean, in Warren County, they got a 3.9% raise this year, which is very good. Vandenberg County, they didn't. They got a much lower rate. And as Representative McNamara says, we need to know why. Why is that? And I think the last I heard, there were 95 to 96% of the school corporations gave raises with that extra money that we did as far as paying off the retirement. So I think we're doing fine with that. Saving the state money with paying off for those capital improvement is a good thing to do. And as we said, we need more time to look at what the Governor's Commission is going to come up with. And then next year's a budget year, and then we'll delve into it and see what we can do.
Senator Messmer, do you go along with the idea that this was the fiscally responsible thing to do with that surplus money, and
it was,
wait till next year?
Sure. I mean, surplus money is a one-time. It's a one-time expenditure that you have, you don't know that you're going to have, you know, that money to build on in future budgets. And so to give it an increased teacher pay, you would have been then just, you know, resetting, you know, your next biennium budget, you know, at that next higher amount. These were projects that were already approved in the budget. We were going to bond them, and rather than pay them over a 20 or 25 year period and pay the interest on those, if we knew the money was going to be there, we'd have paid cash for those, you know, in the budget process last year. We took those pre-approved bonded projects and paid cash for them, saving the taxpayers about $135 million over the life of those bonds. And the governor did not say he was going to commit money this session to teacher pay.
Right.
He said he's got a task force looking at that. The report's going to be out in June, and we'll look at further ways in the future budget sessions to help drive more money, you know, to the school funding formula, to schools, you know, for increased teacher pay.
All right, we have just a couple of minutes left. Give you each an opportunity to talk about maybe a particular bill that you have hopes for here in the closing weeks. We'll start with Representative Bacon.
Well, I got the one I had the hopes for, and that was Senate Bill 61 with Senator Charbonneau, and it was the EMS compact bill. And we were, it's a jobs bill basically for all of Indiana, where our EMS personnel, paramedics, can operate across state lines in a short period of time, which they weren't able to do before legally. So now with the compact, and the other states are hoping to put that in, and we've got that done. That's one of the things I've really been pushing on with that, the nurse compact bill last year, and with the EMS one this year. So it's helping our workforce development and doing a better job.
Representative McNamara, just a couple weeks to go. What do you hope to see?
House Bill 1002 is the decoupling of teachers' pay from test scores. Exceptionally important. It's in the Senate right now.
Right.
And real quick, my House Bill 1225, which is brought to me by the Fraternal Order of Police, but actually based on local incident here with Alan Gansman, police officer who was hit by a distracted driver, nearly killed, and that's going to be heard this next week in the Senate. I believe you're my sponsor.
I am, yes.
Which takes us right to Senator
that.
Messmer.
Yeah.
In the closing seconds we have, what are your goals for these final weeks?
My bill I'm most excited about seeing across the finish line isn't a bill that's in Representative McNamara's committee, Senate Bill 206, and it deals with the deposition of child sex abuse victims. Right now, defense attorneys have unrestricted access to a child that's a victim of a sex crime. One of only 5 states that doesn't put some boundaries up on that process. Worked with Representative McNamara and Representative Steuerwald to get that bill into a really good spot that the judges like it, the defense attorneys don't hate it, prosecutors love it, and it'll really protect children.
All right, we will keep an eye on that one. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. Senator Messmer, Representative McNamara, Representative Bacon, thank you so much. Next week, our scheduled guests are Indiana State Senator Vanita Becker and Indiana State Representatives Holly Sullivan and Shane Lindauer. Thanks for joining us for WNIN Lawmakers.